All right, so now that I have my little bass sound that I've created on track 3, I want to create more of a lead type sound that's going to go on track 2. Now again, track 2 is set to its default, which is that one little lonely sawtooth. Now I want to use both oscillators, and I want to create a sound that kind of utilizes a bit more of a thickening, chorusy type sound. And I'm going to do this by using 2 oscillators and slightly detuning them against each other. Let me go to oscillator 1, and again, oscillator 1 by default is generating that sawtooth. Now I think in this case, I'm going to go for something a little bit different than a sawtooth. I'm going to change this to a square, or pulse, square, often used interchangeably. And I'm going to go ahead and utilize a little bit of pulse width modulation. Actually, before I do that, let me just go ahead and slightly detune this. We have fine tune, which is here, and this is going to detune the sound based on cents, percentage of the semitone. And we have detune here, which would detune it based on the frequency. So we can get a slightly different sound depending on which one of these that we use. I'm going to use the detune knob here and detune this a little bit flat. I'm going to bring in oscillator 2. And with this one, I will also use a pulse wave. I'm going to turn this oscillator up. And already, since the first oscillator is a little bit flatter than this one, we can hear this kind of a chorusy sort of sound. Now, I want the pitch of these both to be centered around the default pitch, which would mean that detune would be set at 0. If I go to oscillator 1, if I press this knob, I can see the value, minus 19. So oscillator 2, I'm going to detune this by plus 19. All right, so now we hear that sound. Now, I think I'd also like to make this a little bit thicker. I'm going to go ahead and add the sub oscillator for oscillator 2. I'm also going to utilize a bit of pulse width modulation, just like I did for the bass. I'm going to make this relatively slow. And I'm going to do the same thing for oscillator 1. Some relatively slow movement there. All right, so now I've got that going on. I'm going to move on to my filter page here. And again, I want this to be more of a lead type sound. So I'm not really worried about it being a bassy sound. So I can feel free to remove some of the lower frequencies. Now our first filter, as we know, is just a low pass filter. So I don't want to change the filter cutoff frequency to be too low. I can add a little bit of overdrive here, but I don't want to go too crazy with it. And the main thing I want to focus on is the second filter here. I want this to be able to sit on top of that other sound that I have. Let me turn this up a bit, the track volume. There we go. All right, so we have different filter types that I could use. The default is a high pass, and we have 2 different high pass filters that basically have 2 different slopes. High pass 2 has a more steep slope, so less of the low frequencies will come through. While high pass 1 has a more gradual slope, where a lot more of the lower frequencies will creep in below the cutoff point. We also have a band pass. So now we're only focusing on a specific range of frequencies, a specific frequency band. Generally, this is going to be isolating more of the mid frequencies, cutting off the lows and cutting off the highs. Now, I think this could be interesting because if I bring in the LFO and I utilize that to modulate the filter frequency, since we're only focusing on a specific band of frequencies, this combination could be pretty interesting. So I'm going to do that next. I'm going to move from the filter section over to the LFO.